Welcome, everyone. I'd like to introduce Liz Tom and how to be a good mentor.
Hi. So I'm going to give a talk today on how to be a good mentor. Not how to be a great mentor, but a good one. Let's see. It doesn't want to work. Okay, so I am currently a creative technologist at ISL in DC. I got there last year after changing careers from being a film production coordinator and supervisor. So this is a new career for me, which is why I'm very, very lucky to have some great mentors at my company. So basically, why should you care about being a great mentor or a good mentor? Basically, if your juniors get better, then you have less work to do, hopefully. I've taken over a lot of work from the more senior engineers to free them up to be able to do other types of projects, so now they don't have to worry about other things. So I'm going to tell you about my experience at ISL from when I first got there. Basically, I got a job there as an apprentice about a year ago, and they assigned me this guy as my mentor. His name is Johnny Ray. He is super cool. He even has a sticker of himself that looks like that. I had no idea what to expect when I signed up. I actually was moving from Portland to DC. I had never been to DC in my life. They wrote me an email and said, "Congratulations, you've got an apprenticeship. This is your mentor, Johnny." Johnny responded with an email that looked like this. And I had no idea what to expect. I was like, oh man, I've never actually seen Star Wars. I don't know if I'm going to fit in. I didn't know if this was a good thing. And it didn't look good because these guys look kind of mean. But he did tell me it was good. So after I started at the company, I got super lucky. He was a great mentor. He set up weekly meetings for me. It was really fun. And at the end of it, they offered me a full-time job. So I think he did a pretty good job. So that part was cool. Actually, after my mentorship ended with him, they officially decided to make an official mentorship program at the company. So he was reassigned as my mentor. And what I found interesting was actually a lot of our senior devs were asking for mentors because they were looking to expand their skill sets. So a lot of our back-end engineers were looking for front-end mentors, and a lot of our front-end engineers were looking for back-end mentors. So it's kind of cool. So basically, everyone at our company now is either a mentor or a mentee or both. All right. So almost everyone at my company has kind of mentored me in some way. Some successfully, some not so successfully. And we're all still learning kind of the best way to help people out. I even started helping to mentor some designers to teach them some basic programming skills so they can prototype some of their designs. So it's been pretty fun experimenting. And these are just some basic rules after polling a bunch of friends to see kind of the things that they felt like good mentors had in common. This one might seem really obvious to a lot of you, but actually it turns out this is not that obvious. Talk to your mentee. If you don't have time to take on a mentee, you shouldn't do it. There are, I think, people who find the word mentor to sound really cool, so they're like, oh yeah, I want to do that. They don't take the time to realize that they actually need to be there for the mentee to provide some sort of help. So just make sure you have time to talk to your mentee. Number 2, make them think. Don't just tell them what to type. If you sit there and tell them word for word what to type, they're never going to learn. If you make them think and explain the logic behind why you're telling them they should do something one way or the other, then they'll learn. Just telling them what to type over and over again just turns into them learning how to type what you're saying, which isn't very helpful for anybody. Number 3, be positive, but also be honest. Basically, your mentee is going to respond to your attitude. If every single time you guys meet and you go over their code and everything is horrible and awful, they're going to feel terrible about themselves. But if you tell them that there are certain things they did that were great, and then go into what they could do to improve and keep things on a positive note, it makes it a lot easier for them to learn and grow and more accepting of what you're telling them is wrong. Also, number 4, keep an open mind. It's actually pretty cool because you can learn a lot from your mentee. A mentor-mentee relationship shouldn't be one way. It should be a two-way relationship. I have 2 mentors at my company, and the second one, the first day we met, was basically like, Liz, you need to ask me lots and lots of questions. Don't think that anything is too dumb. And his reasoning behind that was like, basically, I'm not sure if I understand things as well as I think I do. So if you ask me a question and I don't know how to explain it well, I'm going to have to look it up. So he's allowed me to ask whatever questions I want, but also in doing that, he has actually learned a few things because I see things in a different way than he does. So he has to reevaluate why he was asking me to do something one way versus another. Number 5, be a friend. It's a lot easier to ask questions when you can trust the person that you're asking these questions to. You don't have to be best friends, but just be a friend. One of my mentors has a required consumption list for me. On there, he has a bunch of books for me to read. But in addition to those books, he also has movies that he wants me to watch so that I can understand cultural references, like when he sent me those pictures of Star Wars. Regular meeting times. They don't have to be weekly. They don't have to be bi-weekly. They can be at whatever increment you're comfortable with, but there should be some sort of regularity. It can be once a month, in person, via Skype, however you want to do it, because your mentor and mentee don't have to be in the same building. You can have somebody in a different time zone than you, but there should be some sort of regularity so that your mentee understands like what's going to happen. If you're sitting there wondering, oh, are we going to meet this week or next week? Or are we meeting in 2 days or the next day? It's really difficult to try to progress. A lot of my mentors have projects for me, and so by having regular meetings, I know exactly when my deadlines are to meet. Keeping up with that, make rules. People have boundaries. If you don't want your mentee asking you questions all the time, let them know. If you want to be asked questions over Slack first before they ask you in person, you should let them know. If you want to be emailed a whole list of questions, just let them know. You need to set your boundaries so that they understand when they're allowed to contact you and in what way you want to be contacted. Otherwise, some people might be too scared to ever contact you, or some people might contact you basically every second of the day. Let them know too, like, you know, before you ask me a question, I want you to try to Google it for about 15 minutes before you come to me. Or I want you to try to figure it out first for 20 minutes before you come to me with a question. So let them know what you expect of them. Number 8, be patient. Patience is definitely really important. I think I've tested my mentors' patience quite a bit, but they have all figured out different ways to communicate. Sometimes I don't get it the first time around when they explain something to me, but a lot of that has to do with we communicate differently. So they try to figure out different ways to explain the same concept to me so that I'll understand it. And without them explaining something 2 or 3 times, sometimes I still don't get it, but they've been patient enough to keep going at it and trying from different directions. Number 9, have a plan. If you meet without a plan and you don't know what you're going to say, you don't know what you're going to do, these meetings become really unproductive. Even if your meeting is just, hey, ask some questions. Come to me with 3 questions. It makes your meetings more productive. I have 2 projects going on right now that we're working on outside of the context of work, so they're side projects, but I know that I need to complete them every meeting we have. And also it makes sure that I'm researching the right things for our meetings. Otherwise, when we didn't have plans, we would kind of sit there and stare at each other for a long time. So it's not really productive if you don't know what you're going to do. And lastly, you should have fun with it. Mentor-mentee relationship can be really fun. You can learn a lot, and you can make some really cool stuff. So that went a lot faster than I was anticipating, but if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Sure.
Hi. So as long as you ended a little bit early, do you have any thoughts on how to take on the role of the mentee? You have your top 10 list for being the mentor.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do to sort of improve a relationship if you're the one learning from someone else?
I'd say listen. You need to keep an open mind because you probably don't know everything. So you should listen to them. I mean, that's the main thing.
And sorry to put you a little bit on the spot here. So.
But yeah, and then, you can just ask people to be your mentor too.
Thanks for an amazing talk with so many cool GIFs. I really love them, and to see so many of them is really fun. So I co-organize the Chicago Python meetup group, and we have a mentorship program where we pair up experienced developers with new developers, and we have worked with 60 people almost now in 2 seasons. And while it has been pretty much of a success, some of the mentorship pairs do not work out. So my task as is really to pair mentor and mentees. What was the process like, or what is the current process like in your organization for figuring it out who would be a good mentor for an incoming mentee?
Right now, because we let people within the company also choose, you can either choose your mentor, you can ask for a specific person, or if you don't know who you want to be your mentor, usually who they choose is someone they feel like needs to learn more leadership skills. So our organization is pretty small. We only have 15 people to choose from, so we're not dealing with a big of a group, but I think the mentor-mentee relationships that have been the best have been people who chose their mentors specifically.
And this is after they have come to the organization and spent some time.
Yeah.
This is after they have come to the organization, spent some time, met people. Okay.
I just happened to get really lucky with my pairing, so we maintain that relationship now. I think a lot of it is just personalities, to be honest. Like, if you get along as, like, friends, you're most likely going to get along in a mentor-mentee relationship.
So you said that you have 2 mentors right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do they cover different things, and like how often do you guys meet? And I'm just kind of curious about some of the more details about the relationship and what's covered in it.
So I have 2 different mentors. One is, so he's a JavaScript guy, and he teaches a lot of front-end stuff. So I work with him on that part. And we meet once a week in what he calls lightsaber training. It's an hour a week where we just go over any questions I have, or he starts explaining topics to me, and we also come up with project ideas. My other mentor is our lead infrastructure engineer, and that's who got me very interested in Python. So we meet about once every 2 to 3 weeks. It's a lot harder to get him on a regular basis because his schedule is so irregular. But we also have a project we're working on.
Okay. I'm really excited to hear that your office is so heavily mentor-mentee friendly. I'm also a career changer, and they started a mentorship program a year into me being there, which was awesome. So I'm actually kind of curious, could you talk a little bit about what that first experience was like? And maybe if you could talk to yourself at that point in time, something you would have maybe brought up, or something that maybe people who are beginning as a mentee, what they should pay attention to in that first kind of session or those first few sessions.
The first session, I was too scared to really ask anything. I was very confused during onboarding. I didn't understand a lot what was happening. They were saying all these words I didn't really understand. Like, they kept talking about puppet and chef and salt stack. And I was really confused, but I also didn't want to let my mentor know that I was confused. So I didn't ask him questions for like 3 or 4 weeks until after I got comfortable. So I wish I had started asking him questions sooner.
Anyone else?
Where I work, we have a co-op program that's been going on for about 13 years now. And one of the big things that a lot of the co-ops have come out and said as they're finishing is that they would have liked to have heard more advice early on. So was there a point where you felt like you weren't getting a piece of advice soon enough, but you just didn't know what that piece of advice was? And maybe if you could maybe just elaborate on that in saying, what would you say to these co-ops now if you were the more senior person? Like what would that piece of advice be? Would it be something process related? Would it be more like communication related? What would that biggest piece of advice be that you would be giving to somebody leaving that you would have rather have given to them when they came in versus when they left?
I think it's hard because everyone wants to know something different, and everyone comes from a different background, and everyone knows different things going in. So it's really hard to figure out, I guess, what kind of advice to give someone unless they know what they want. But then they don't know what they want because there's so much to know. So I think it is definitely one of those things where it's nice if you can have a mentor that you know is going to be with you for a really long time, so you can grow into like your interests.
So you mentioned that with at least one of your mentors, you're working on a project together and collaborating on something. Have you found that to be sort of a more constructive way for that relationship to work than for the mentee to have a project and the mentor to just sort of advise on it rather than contributing directly?
I think it depends on the mentor. I know that one of my mentors is super, super busy with administrative things, so I don't know if he would be as excited to work on a project with me. The mentor I'm working on a project with is super excited because he's also going to be learning things from this project as well. So that's why it's beneficial to both of us, which is kind of cool.
I really liked that you said that you were afraid to ask questions at first, and it took maybe like a few weeks before you started to feel comfortable. So I'm wondering if you, looking back, was there anything that your mentor could have said at the beginning that could have streamlined that process, or maybe that you will say to your mentee in the future that will help them feel more safe to ask a question, or some sort of strategy there? 'Cause it's a
don't-
common problem, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know if that's something that you can overcome because, I don't know, for me, I was like, well, why did they hire me if I don't know any of these things? And I didn't want to let them know that I didn't know any of those things. I was like, oh, maybe they'll just fire me right away. So I don't know, like, exactly what he could have done differently. I think it's more kind of, one problem that I had was they onboarded me with a senior engineer at the same time. And so he seemed to understand everything that was happening, and I didn't understand anything. And I also didn't know that he was a senior engineer, so that I wasn't sure if like he was a junior with me or if like was happening. So I think maybe onboarding people with similar skilled people is probably helpful if you can do that.
So, what advice do you have from the mentor to the mentee about giving the correct answer to a question versus a good enough answer? Because a lot of times, so I teach middle school programming, and a lot of times the students will ask like, oh, what did people write before Python existed? And I don't really want to show them assembly. So I kind of always like skirt the issue, but it feels dirty. Do you have anything to say about good enough versus correct answers?
I think it depends on where your mentee is at or where your students are at. If you feel like, I mean, you really have to know the relationship that you have and their skill level. And that's why I think it's important for a long-term mentor-mentee relationship. You really start to understand their skill level. And so, in general, I mean, I like to be told the complete answer versus just a sort of answer because I'd like to know the whole picture. Some people just kind of want a glossed over version of everything. So it is good to set goals with your mentee to like figure out what they want to get out of the relationship.
Yeah, so I liked your rule to always have fun. So what are some examples of some things your mentor did with you that, you know, kind of help facilitate a more comfortable environment and have you enjoy, you know, the experience of being taught by him? If you could maybe give some examples either that, you know, he did with you or that you've done with someone else.
So, for example, my mentor gave me that list of things to do, including watching films. That made me like feel like, oh, this is like more casual and fun rather than just completely all work related. One thing I did with the designers that I'm mentoring right now is we were just able to do any sort of art project that came to their mind. So they started drawing a lot of things with CSS, and they had a lot of fun with that. I think their CSS is actually now better than mine, which is a little scary, but it's okay.
Got time for one more. Going. Gone.
Cool. Thank you very much.